We're going to be talking about equipment selection and installation today. A little bit about Gree before we get started. So Gree technology, efficiency and performance. So the whole goal behind inverter technology is to provide efficiency, and Gree does a great job at being the top of the line in that. Also, very impressive is the reliability in the design. From the coil protections, self-diagnostics, quiet high-efficiency fans, high-temperature resistance circuit boards. One of the most impressive things that Greg and I like to talk about is the neatness of the design. Everything is neat and clean, and there's zip ties and grommets, and it looks really, really nice. So, but the proof is in the comfort. Turbo cooling, intelligent defrost, low noise, the I-fill option, negative 31 in the winter and up to 129 in the summer. Also, recently, Gree was named Fortune 500 2022. And the most interesting part of the entire presentation today is going to be that we have a website. I know that it's a joke that I use in all the trainings. Did you know that we have a website? But the point is that there is a plethora of information here. So here on the website, one thing that I like to mention is the equipment's going to come with a printed manual in the box. That manual is not always the most up-to-date information. We direct everyone to the website because we're able to make changes overnight or the same day on the website. So if there's some information that's missing or something that we run across in technical support, we'll go ahead and get with the website guy and have it uploaded almost immediately. The other thing that I'd like to mention is when I open my laptop in the morning, if I'm in the office and I open my computer, I start my web browser, it automatically pops up system documentation and the Gree Comfort main page and parts lookup. I stay there all day long. That is my resource. And that's why we have this website, and we've put a lot of effort into improving it. So to start off with, this is the system documentation page that we're on right now. How you get there is resources, and then you go to documents, and then system documentation literature. So on that page, you're going to see over to the left, we've got some little quick tabs, resource materials, single zone, multi-zone, multi-pro, archives. So quick way to get to all of the material that you may be needing to look at when you're selecting your equipment. So just for an example, we'll click on this, we'll take a look. So here's your sales brochure, your installation instructions, quick reference guides, service manuals, and submittals. So before we get into the equipment selection, let's go back a little bit and we'll take a look at the Contractors tab. So you can always find most of what you need here on resources, but Contractors, if you take a look at the Contractor tab, you're going to have the system documentation there as well, so it's easy to find. You'll also have how to become a Gree Select dealer if you're not already, and the Gree Select dealer login. So if you're needing to register your equipment for the extended warranty, you go to the Gree Select dealer login. And then also a good resource, give me just a second here.
Take them into the Aircode troubleshooting tool.
Aircode, okay. So Gree Contractor Support, where you're gonna, on this tab here, There's before you install a Gree, so a little bit of introduction to, all the tools that you'll need, all the things that we recommend. Training, frequently asked questions, and we'll go over some of those at the end. Instructional videos, there's a lot of install tips on the instructional videos. Troubleshoot error codes. And this isn't just error codes, right? This is also status codes. So anything that you have come up on an indoor unit display or an outdoor display, it's going to be listed here. The cool thing about this is you just type it in, and this is a common one that you might see. It's not an error code, it's just a status code. It's showing you that the indoors are not all in the same mode. So for a multi-system, if you've got one in heat and one in cool, these units are not expensive enough to do that. We don't have 3-pipe heat recovery in the mini splits. So all it is just put all of the indoor units in the same mode, and then this code will go away. So now let's go back to, and you'll notice the navigation tab here always stays at the top wherever I'm at. It's still up there at the top, so I can go back. So let's talk a little bit about bulletins. So if you go to resources and go to documents, bulletins, anytime there is any type of update, and this is a good example here, clearances. We made an addendum to the clearances, allowable clearances for the indoor and outdoor units. So before, if we aren't able to update the manual, we'll have it in a bulletin like this. So we changed it to 3-inch clearance on the indoors. Correct. At the top, right, Greg? So, and any other updates that we have, there's a little AHRI NEAT update bulletin, Wi-Fi info, things like that. Also, if you want to get these sent to your email, go down to the bottom of the page. It doesn't matter which one you're on. You can scroll all the way down to the bottom and just put in your email address. Select that you're a contractor, so you'll get those service-related type emails. If you select homeowner, you're not going to get anything service-related. And then, of course, if you're a distributor, sign up as a distributor. And just put in your email address there and hit subscribe. So that covers bulletins. The rebates, Greg.
Correct.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about rebates as well. So, this has to do, we're talking about install. This is kind of where we start, right? Before we even go out to the house and do our load calculation. So, sorry, I'm having a little trouble seeing the screen from this angle. So, rebates. So if you go to distributors and click on rebates and just type in your zip code here, and then you can hit update. It'll show you all of the rebates in your area. So we've got some multi-gen 2, which is a couple of the systems that we have out here today. And then we've got some flex on there. Pretty good rebates in that area, apparently. Multi-pro rebates. So that's a good resource for you to help you sell with your customer.
Let's go to the submittals and talk about the importance of the submittals for quick reference guide.
Yep.
And also let's talk about the fact that they should navigate these from their phones and stuff and get used to using the site.
Yeah,
so they can get quick reference.
That's a really good example. All right. So if you go to the system documentation page, and over to the left we've got our skip to quick links there. Hit multi-zone, and I'm going to choose the multi-gen 2 because it's the newest. And then you scroll down to submittals, I have a multi-18 sitting over here that we'll look at in a little bit, so I'm just going to pull that one up. Give it just a minute.
So the importance to the submittals is the fact that it's quick reference. They can get to this very quickly. It gives them all the piping rules.
Yes. The other things that you'll find on the submittal, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. Here's your quick reference. Here's your matchups, the indoor units that you can put on this particular unit, the options, how many indoors you can put, and what indoor units you can put on there. Also, you're going to have refrigerant piping, so you'll have your additional charge amount. You'll have the pre-charge length, the min-max. So you'll notice the multi-gen 2, you got 33 feet for your initial pre-charge. And then on max pipe length, the furthest indoor unit, you've got 66 there. Total pipe length, what is that? 131. And then what's the minimum?
Always 10 feet.
Always 10 feet. Not 9 feet, not 9.5 feet, 10 feet. And that doesn't include the portion that's on the indoor unit. So you've got a section of pipe, maybe 1.5 feet, sometimes 2 feet long. It does not include that.
Let's keep in mind across the board with Gree, it's always 10 feet minimum, no matter what unit you're working on.
Doesn't
even
matter.
If it's multi-pro.
Yep.
To that first Y branch, it is 10 feet. So that's an easy thing to remember. You're always at 10 feet.
You've also got your clearances here as well. So if this was an indoor unit submittal, I'd see my indoor unit clearances. This is just an outdoor, so I've got my outdoor clearances. And we've updated that as well. You'll notice it used to always be like 12 inches to the wall on the back, depending on how close you are on the left or the right. And that's been updated to be 6 inches left, back. And also don't forget your service guy. It says 12 inches to the top, but if you only leave, let's say you install this under a deck, if you only leave a foot,
that's not going to be fun to work on.
You're not going to be able to see the board to work on it or get to anything else really. You'd basically have to move that unit out to be able to work on it. So keep that in mind. Let's not forget our service guys.
You know, and the reason why we steer you towards the submittals is because nobody wants to read all the way through the installation instructions.
Yes.
This is a quick reference document. It gives you all your piping rules. It gives you your clearances. It's all just in a few pages. It gives you all your matchups of what you can use with that unit, how many indoors you can use. It's all in just a couple pages, and it's really easy to access even from your phone. If you got a smartphone,
yep.
You get out to the job, you can pull that up. Now you get all those rules fresh in your mind.
And then the last thing, thank you, Greg. The last thing that we'll kind of hit on here on the website, then we'll get into the fun stuff.
Well, and the other thing I encourage too on the website is get on there, get familiar with the website so you know where things are, so that you're not in that, I need to get this job done, trying to find things on the website. Spend some time. I know nobody has free time, I don't either, but try to find some time to spend on the website to navigate it and learn where things are at.
And also, under resource materials here on the website, there's a lot of different information here. The Gree full line product catalog has a lot of great information in it. You're going to have things about the remotes, what wall controllers work. Also, if you go to Compatibility, and there's a little bit quicker way to get to this, I forgot. Documents, resources, documents, compatibility charts, and there you are. Gree ductless compatibility, controller compatibility, so that's going to be your control. It'll show you what controls go with what. It does show that in the catalog as well, but this is a little bit.
And we get that call often. What control can I use? What wire control can I use with this unit? What remote can I reuse with this unit?
Yes.
you know, it's a quick resource. You can get to it and you can look at it really quick and know exactly what controls can work with what units.
And then especially when you're looking at, you know, the Vireo or the multi-zones, you know, what indoor units can I put on this new multi-Gen 2 that we have, right? So just pull up that compatibility chart and there you go. You can use a Levo, a Vireo, a Sapphire. You can put all of those on different models of the multi-Gen 2. Now, keep in mind, anytime that you are matching up a multi with indoors, you cannot go over, so if you got an 18, you can't put an 18 on it. It's got to be under that. So multi 18, you could put a 9 on it, you could put a 12 on it, you could put 2 9s on it. I think you can even put 2 12s on it as long as your load calculation allows for that it doesn't need the full 24 the whole time. But just keeping that in mind is a good rule of thumb, but go to the compatibility chart and there you go. So
I know I'm going to bounce you, Daniel, here, but let's bounce back to submittals.
Yeah.
Because of the new Gen 2, let's point out the differences on, I believe it's the 18 and the 36. Mm-hmm. There's some significant changes with those units, and we need to make everybody aware of it. Let's do that while we've got a minute to pull up those submittals for those two.
All right, multi-Gen 2. Let's see. Let's go back to system docs. So back here.
I think just now is a good time to talk about this and make sure everybody's aware of it, because if you've been doing the previous multi-21s, and if you don't look at the documentation, you're going to end up thinking it was the same as the previous gen, and it's not.
Very, very true.
So one thing right off the bat I know is you're no longer allowed to do one unit.
Correct.
They have to have 2 units.
Minimum of 2.
Minimum of 2.
Yes. Go ahead.
I'll let you go ahead and finish.
All right. So if you take a look at the submittal for the multi 36, you can see the connectable compatibility. I'm not quite sure where you were going with the differences between.
There's just not as many ports.
Correct. I had forgotten about that. Yeah. So on the multi 36, you've only got, and we've got one right here. You've only got 4 ports, where used to there was 5
ports.
Correct.
I couldn't remember exactly what it was, but I knew there was something to it.
Yep. And we've got one sitting over here that we'll get a shot of here in a little while. But there's a little bit of a design difference, not much. But you'll also notice on the multi 36, they've stamped the circuits a little bit better, so you can see it a little bit better. And they've changed the cover a little bit, and they've also changed they stamped, instead of just having a sticker on your wire connections, they put a stamp in it, and it looks a little bit different. The connections are a little bit further up in there. There's a little bit of difference there.
And we're going to show that when we zero into that equipment as well.
All right. Anything else you could think of?
No, that's just the main things. Especially when you start getting into doing the Gen 2. I really recommend you guys until you get familiar with putting in the Gen 2s and knowing. Just make sure you're looking at the submittals. Make sure you're on board with the new Gen 2 stuff, and then that way you're not finding yourself where you bid a job or something expecting it to do one thing and it don't. So
and if you got bored there for a second, because it's just website and we're just chit-chatting about this, this is the resource that you need to be familiar with so that you're aware of anything, any new updates, any changes. Gree is excellent about listening to feedback from contractors, distributors, and our technical team and our company. So when we give them some suggestions, a lot of times it'll change. And we have to make sure that matches, and that's where the bulletins come in if there is a change.
So we made that sound like a bad thing, that there's less ports, but we didn't mention, and we should mention, is the good part. The efficiencies went up.
Yes. So even with the SEER 2 change, the efficiencies went up, and the heating capabilities went. Do you want to say up or down? Because it can heat.
It can heat at a colder temperature.
It can heat at a colder temperature.
Correct. I see where you're going with that. Yeah. Okay. But even the Levo units, the single stage units, they went up in efficiency as well. So.
Yes. And I'm super impressed with the is it 4 LIV, the 4th generation of the Levo, and we've got a little baby one sitting here, and we've got a bigger one sitting next to it there. I'm impressed with the efficiency of it, what they've done with this. So, you know, we always, it was presented as kind of, you know, this is the beginning model, and then you have the next step up being the Vireo, and then the next step up is the Sapphire, which is super efficient. And we've got a new version of that coming out next year, which will be even more efficient. So what they've done here, the Levo stepped into that Vireo range. The Vireo's almost stepped into the Sapphire range, and the Sapphire is going to continue to...
Even with it being the bottom tier selection, if you want to call it, it will. It's still up there in efficiency. Customers still getting a very efficient unit at a very good price.
Yes, yes, exactly. So, thank you.
No problem.
That was... glad you added to my thoughts there on the website. So, all right, so we will move on forward in the PowerPoint, and then we'll get to, in just a few minutes, actual looking at product. So, installation quick tip videos. You'll notice on the indoor unit, you have a QR code here, and then on the outdoor unit there will be a QR code as well. And you can scan that code with your phone, and it will pop up the greecomfort.com/Gree training. And the point of that is that all of the install quick tip videos are there. And also, if you haven't already followed us on YouTube, all of those same videos that we do, they're going to be stored on youtube.com Gree Comfort. So, all right, let's talk about load calculations, indoor unit options. So when we talk about load calculations, what we're referring to, because we don't get involved in job site load calculations. We're not going to decide for you what size unit is appropriate for a space. And you know, it's an industry standard, and so it's the most important part of the job is knowing what size. You know, in the past there's been this terrible phrase about inverters and mini splits, is that you can't oversize them. That is completely false. You can oversize them, and very easily, especially with the ultra heat products, because they can heat down to -31. So if you are let's say, for instance, you have another manufacturer already plugged into your load calculation software, and you accidentally use that when you get to your manual E for your equipment selection, you're going to way oversize the equipment, because at 0 degrees, a 3-ton Gree unit may be putting out 100% of its capacity, whereas another brand may only be putting out 80%. Or if you go back to conventional, it's done.
And I'll be honest with you, the ones you guys really need to watch on the heating side is the Sapphires. The
Yes.
Sapphires have a really high heat output.
Yes.
So if you're sizing by nominal capacity, it's going to get you in trouble.
And the multi-ultra specifically.
Correct.
So, you know, a 3-ton multi-ultra, you get down to -20 and you're still putting out 80%.
So it goes right back to what we were talking about earlier, is the submittals, because that's going to give you not the nominal capacity, it's going to give you the actual cooling and heating capacities.
Extended ratings.
And that's where this is going to tell you whether or not you're sizing the equipment correctly. So, and keep in mind, it's an air conditioner. So an air conditioner has to have some runtime to it to be able to get humidity and everything else under control. So if you're oversizing equipment and you start getting these short cycles, even with an inverter-driven unit, you're going to have high humidity problems and stuff like that. So
Yes.
EVS, it is fully variable, where it can go from 0 hertz all the way up to 60 hertz. But all these units, if you look at the submittals again, it's going to give you that minimum operation range. And that's something you need to pay attention to as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I tend to talk about that in regards to heating in the Northeast and the North areas, but you're right, Greg, it applies in a big way, especially in Florida, in Louisiana, in areas where there is high humidity, South Carolina, where I live.
Yep.
You can barely cut it with a knife, and having that humidity removed is a huge part of it.
Yep.
All right. So, and the next slide's talking about load calculations in the different areas. Arizona, for example, low humidity, very high outdoor ambient. Mississippi, North Dakota. North Dakota is our high heating demand, low ambient heating capabilities. So, selecting the correct equipment, selecting the correct location for the equipment. I've seen all types of installations. They'll put an indoor unit in a cavity because they want to hide it a little bit.
The homeowners never want to see the unit.
They don't want to see the unit, but if we try to hide it too much, you can do that as long as you have your clearances around it. It's not not a problem. Windows, direct sunlight, occupants, equipment, climate. So. Now let's talk a little bit about the multi-zone system layout. So for a multi-zone, a lot of times a load calculation may be done for a house, right? We are truly zoning with a multi-zone. So we can cut one room off completely, just turn it off, and then just cool another space. So we need to know exactly what that space requires. So room by room load calculations are extremely important when you're talking about a truly zoned system.
And you also got to think about the fact that, like in that picture showing you, you basically got a second floor and a first floor. So remember, your cold air is going to fall in the summertime, and
the heat's going to rise in the
wintertime. And that can't always be answered in the heat load calculation. You need to talk to that homeowner and ask them how they intend to be using those rooms. Because if they're going to be keeping those up for floors at really cold temperatures, then you're going to be freezing them in the first floor. So, not only load calculation, but talk to the consumer, talk to the end user, whether it be a commercial space, whether it be a residential space, and make sure you are talking to them and how they're planning on maintaining the temperatures in those rooms in both summer and winter, so that you can help them decide what is the right system for that house.
And also, don't forget, select the outdoor unit after you have selected your indoor units. So you do your zone by zone load calculation, you determine how much you need inside, and then you select the outdoor that fits that. We want to size at 100% if possible to provide better performance and longer life for the equipment. We don't want to oversize it too much, because then when all zones are calling, you may have one that's only getting 3,000 BTUs on a 9K because every other unit is calling as well. The outdoor unit, it knows when you connect an 18K to a multi, that multi knows that that's an 18K. So it's going to try to produce 18,000 BTUs going to that circuit, whereas the 9K, whatever's left over, it'll send to the 9K. So you've got to keep in mind that it has to balance out. Otherwise, you're going to have spaces that are uncomfortable because it is truly zoned.
Well, the other thing you got to think about here too is, in the golden rule of the zoning, is just because you can zone every room doesn't mean you should zone every room.
Very true. Very true.
It may be more beneficial to combine a couple rooms into one zone. And that's the good part about Gree's multi-zone units, is you have a variety of indoor units you can use. You don't have to use a wall mount in every room. You could use a ducted unit and pick up 2 rooms. So.
So let's talk about the equipment selection. Greg, if it would work better if you stood in front of the Gree unit here.
Okay.
So can you see the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
From there?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the updated equipment selection list, and so we're starting. We've talked about the Levo kind of being the no longer the bottom of the line, right? So we've got Levo Gen 4, the Vireo Gen 3. The change to it was it just went to another revision. The Sapphire is kind of the top of the line single zone, and then we've got the Flex Eco, which is coming out in the next year, or
I'm not sure.
Okay, ask your local sales representative. and then the Flex, the multi-zone indoor units. You can use the Levo Gen 4s, the Vireo Gen 3s, the Sapphires, with the multi-Gen 2s or the multi-Ultras. And then we have the multi-Pro, which Greg is going to train on tomorrow. So single zone mini splits, this is a good example of what you can use with what. Don't forget the Vireo Gen 3 is now compatible as a single zone with the cassette slim duct and the floor ceiling, not the mini floor console, the floor ceiling model. And of course a high wall as well. The Levo Gen 4 is -4 to 122 cooling, -13 to -275, heating range. The Vireo Gen 3, -22 heating, cooling down to -20. You don't need any additional products installed or low ambient kit. It's already made to do that. The Vireo Ultra, it comes in the 30 and 36K, right, Greg? Yeah, it says right there. Heating range -31, and then cooling range 0 to 115. The Sapphire is -22 to 129 heating, 0 to 129 cooling range. That one is 27 SEER 2, which is pretty impressive. It started out, I think it started out at like the first initial testings for that model were 40 SEER is what it started out at. Before they did, AHRI, and after they do some testing, and it takes some time to kind of get the number they settle on. So hopefully the next revision, they'll impress us. The multi-zone products, the multi-Gen 2, which we have here today with us, and the multi-Ultra. So the multi-Gen 2, we already kind of went over that. Negative 22 heating, cooling, negative 22 to 118. It says up to 5 zones. So the multi-42 would be the 5-zone option, whereas the multi-36 and 42 were the previous 5-zone options. The multi-ultra, so you're going down to negative 31 on that one, and then cooling 0 to 115. So now that you kind of have an overview of the equipment and understand a little bit more about it, when you are completed with your load calculation, you know you have an idea for what you want to do at the space, then you can go to Contractor tab up at the top of the website and then click on the System Builder app. And if you haven't signed up or used it before, just click Sign Up, and all you have to do is put in your information there and create yourself a little password. We do ask that you picked that you're a contractor so that we know, and then just click create account. I already have one just for ease of using this here. So we'll go through and do one. So we'll just create a new project here. And you do have to create a new project before you can go in and look at the different options or selections. So whatever you want to put in there as the project name, it's not going to require you to fill all of this out, but if you're doing it for a customer, you may want to go ahead and put the information. That way when you print it out or you email it as a PDF to your customer, all of the information is there. So we'll just call this Tech Talk Test. And then you have to save it. It'll say saved successfully down there at the bottom. You can close that, and then it'll give you the option build a new system. So once we get to this portion, we'll select what we want to do. Just for simplicity, I'm going to choose a single zone. You've got two options here, the 115 or the 208, 230. And then choose what size you're looking for. So I'm going to put this in my garage. So I'm going to put the 2-ton in my garage. Unit type. Let's say I want to hide the unit. I'm going to put it above the garage in the attic space, or above a closet. I'm going to put it in the utility room. So it gives you the Vireo Gen 3, which is the only single zone option for that slim duct. And then it gives you a lot of good information about it. So it automatically gives you your max line length, your max lift drop. So you kind of have an idea for the job site space. What if I'm not going to be able to do that 98 feet? I'm 110. Then I've got to re-select equipment and choose something else that will work. Sometimes you may go from the Levo to the Sapphire just based on the available line set max length. The other thing that you can do here is click View here on the submittal portion, and it's going to go ahead and pull that up. There's my Vireo Gen 3 with my ducted 24, and it's going to give me all the information on that.
Daniel, speak a little bit about why it comes with a wired controller.
Why this comes with a wired controller? So if you'll notice, I'm not sure if you can see it on the slide or on the screen share, But if you look, there's a dot kind of to the right bottom of the display on that wire controller. And what that is an infrared receiver. So the remote control will not work if you do not plug up the wire controller and point that remote at it. So that's why it comes with both. You have to install that wire controller to be able to utilize the remote controller on a ducted unit. Now the cassette, you don't have to have it because you can see the cassette. It's not hidden behind a wall or behind sheetrock. So the remote will work fine. You don't have to install a wire controller.
So that brings in another question that I think we should answer is it beneficial to put in a wire controller on a cassette?
Oh, most certainly.
Why?
The biggest reason, and I want to know what your thoughts are, but the biggest reason to me is in the settings on that remote control, I can choose where it's sensing the temperature from. I can choose the wire controller to sense the temperature, or I can choose the return air on the slim duct to sense the temperature.
Okay, so what if I got a customer that absolutely does not want any part of that wire controller being mounted on the wall? Why do I still want to put that controller on?
I'd love to know.
Air codes.
Good point.
So you can set that controller up to where it's not sensing the temperature at the controller. You're still using the return air sensor. So you can have that even if it's up in the attic. It can stay in the attic, stay right there with the cassette, stay wherever above the unit, however it's mounted. But then if that machine ever goes down for any reason, your air code is displayed on that wired controller. If you have a remote, it's not going to display the air code.
I like it. That's an excellent point. Sorry, I just checking to make sure things are operating
it's all good.
Correctly.
I didn't mean to derail you there, but I think that's good information to get out.
Really good information. Thank you. All right. So I'd like to just kind of do this real quickly here. So once I click select, because I've chosen the system, then I can generate a PDF. So I can generate the PDF, I can email it, I can print it out, and then I can hand it and like we were discussing, I can hand it to my customer, and then they see what the equipment looks like that you're planning on installing. So you got a little picture there, they get a little bit better idea. Especially if you're doing a multi-zone. I did the single zone for simplicity, but doing the multi-zone, then you've got a slim duct, you've got a cassette, you've got a high wall, you've got the different indoor options, a mini floor console, and then they can see, okay, that's the mini floor console, that's what's going to be over here in my living room. Oh, this is the high wall, that's what it's going to look like over here in my bedroom. So. All right.
I'd run through an example on multi-zone.
You want to do the multi-zone example?
I would do one, yes.
All right. We'll do it. So back to the System Builder app. All right, new project. All right. Talk 2. All right. Just save it like that, close, build our new system. So let's say you tell me what you want to build, Greg. You want to do a multi-zone with how many? I'm going to do 4?
Do 3.
3 indoor units?
Yeah, because it'll be simpler.
So now we've got our three selections. So we're doing. We're going to have to name each zone. So just for simplicity, we can do B and C. And then once you choose the zone name, you have to choose the type of unit you want for Zone A. So let's say we're going to do, I want to do a mini floor console there. Now I'm going to refer back to my load calculation. I know where the Zone A is. It's going to go in the bedroom, and looking at my load calculation, I need 9,000 BTUs in that space. So, and then Zone B, I'm going to do a wall mount, and then I need 18,000 BTUs in the living room. And then C, we'll do a cassette, and we'll just do a 12K. This one's going in the hallway. All right. So you'll see filter by performance at the top there. You have to choose a cooling range and heating range. So let's select the -22 because I want to hit the multi-gen 2, right? So we'll select that one there. And then what type of wall mount do you want, Greg?
I like the Vireos.
I like the Vireos too. And then outdoor product line, going with the Gen 2, newest one. Outdoor unit size, 30, 36, or 42. Let's just choose a 36. All right. So, got 1, 2, 3. I can do that on that multi-36. And then, so you've got your pictures of your products there. You can select. And then there we go. You can generate a PDF from here. You can click on the submittals links to that particular product there. Multi-Gen 2. There's our submittal data for that one. All right. Now, allowable combinations. And you can take a look at the mini floor console submittal. So I like that they've added this. You can print this out and put your job name and that sort of stuff on it. And you can include that with the equipment selection. Just go ahead and print out the submittals and add it to it. So
I like that right there from the system builder, it takes you right to the submittals, so it makes it very easy for if you're planning a job. You can, I'm always one that I like to put documentation in print still in a folder. Mm-hmm. So I not only have the document to send to the homeowner that they need to see, right, and I can print out the submittals for my indoors and the outdoor unit. I have all my piping rules. I pretty much know everything I need to know about that job. Yep. And how it's going to have to go together. Other than my actual pipe lengths and stuff, but I know what limitations I got to fall under.
All right, so I think we covered that pretty well.
I think so. But the charts are good too because it's quick reference, right? So
also the quick reference guide. I like to have one by my desk. It's available on the website as well. But just a quick reference when I'm on the phone and they're like telling me, hey, I got this indoor, got this outdoor, get the model numbers and take a look, and just to verify that it's a good matchup before we go any further. You know, if there's ever an issue, it always starts with the beginning and then move forward. So you can rule a lot out by keeping a quick reference guide near you. Now, all of the Gree systems that we sell have 5/16 adapters required, or 5/16 ports. Now, the reason is because The U.S. is the odd one out. Everybody else uses 5/16.
Yep.
We're old school. We didn't like that they took R12 from us, so we want to keep that, right? So you will need a mini split adapter on any Gree piece of equipment that you use, 5/16 to quarter adapter. I recommend buying a 10-pack, just so when you lose one, you can still have one. Greg didn't have any yesterday.
I just was planning on going home with yours.
So I'm going to count mine before we get done here. So back to piping best practices. The outdoor unit connections and the indoor unit connections are flare. Most all of the systems that we have are going to be flare, aside from what we'll talk about tomorrow, where you do have to involve some brazing. You have a single vapor low side Schrader port gauge connection for your service hoses on the outdoor units. Why do we not have a liquid, Greg?
That's a good question. I mean, they're both the same side of the system, though. So in cooling mode, they're both low side. In heating mode, they're both high side. So the only way you could have another port, they would have to run a separate line outside that cabinet and give you essentially a permanent suction port.
Right.
And then you'd also have to have a permanent discharge port. So it's going to be more expense, more piping. And when we get into troubleshooting, I know we're going to talk about it. We'll actually demonstrate using them and stuff. We have the service tools. There's a lot of other ways you can get to the same answers that you're looking for without necessarily having to have those ports.
Good explanation.
Keep in mind that your metering devices on all the ductless mini splits, that EEV or cap tube, some of them is just a cap tube, it's in the outdoor unit.
Right.
So it's not like traditional units. It's still an air conditioner, it's still a heat pump, but the biggest difference is that metering device is outside. That's why both lines have to be insulated, because in the summer months they're both low side, and then in the winter months they're both high side. So
that essentially makes our line set an extension of the evaporator. That's why we have to insulate.
Essentially it does.
That's why we have to insulate both lines so that we don't have condensate dripping.
And that's why I stress on that suction line being bent properly, because that is your discharge line in heating mode.
Exactly.
And an oval bend is not the same as a 90-degree clean bend.
Yep.
It's just not the same.
Yep.
So hand bend in this pipe, you want to do that as minimally as possible.
Don't use your elbow.
I like that.
It does not
Right.
work.
Right.
Even if you have brand new soft copper, it doesn't work. All right, we talked about the piping adapters. So you'll see over here on our multi-36 example, we've got the adapters that it came with lined up here. So we've got a couple of 1/4 to 3/8 connectors here. So the documentation, if you look under the documents for the multi, you're going to see piping adapters, and it's a PDF link. And at the moment, it has the old style. We haven't updated the pictures with the new style yet, and I'm sure if you were to need some different ones for whatever application, the part numbers will probably be updated as well to the new ones.
So Daniel, what's the golden rules with the adapters you don't need for the job you just got done doing?
Leave them in the dirt.
Like instructions, right? You kneel on those.
Yeah, you throw the instructions and the adapters in the dirt. No, you save them.
Save them.
Save them. Put them on your truck. I've got a box full of them because I never know, what I might be trying to hook up to test, and they come in really handy.
Yep.
So, and
keep the old ones.
You may be working on something else that you need it for. Who knows? So You'll notice the 18K outdoor unit comes with two 3/8 to halves. It doesn't come with adapters for units you cannot hook up to it. So your multi-36 here comes with adapters of possible indoor unit connections. So you've got enough here that are going to cover whatever indoor capacities and sizes that you want to hook up to it. If you are installing the outdoor unit above the indoor unit and you are further than 30 feet above, so let's say this building is a good example because the roof is probably about 30 feet from here to up there. So if we were to hang a high wall right here, we would need to put an oil bend in the pipe. So and that's, you got to look at your max pipe length when you're doing that.
Whether or not you can do that lift.
Can it do that lift? So there's a max lift, your max pipe length, and if you're over that 30 feet, add the oil bend for every 20 feet of connection pipe. Generally speaking, you're not going to have a model that's going to go far enough for you to add two oil bends. Like you'd be over your max lift or over your max pipe length.
I do want to put out one disclaimer real quick. We're going to talk about multi-pro tomorrow. That oil trap does not apply to multi-pro. We do not do any oil traps with multi-pro.
Just keep in mind
this is multi-zone, mini-split ductless, and single zone. That's it.
Right.
When you get into the multi-pro, it doesn't apply.
And just to clarify a little bit about today's training is we're only talking about mini splits. We're not talking about flex. We're not talking about multi-pro. We sell those items as well and support those. We're only talking about multi and single zone mini split systems, whether it be ductless or the slim duct ducted or the cassette. Multi-pro and flex is different rules. So, all right, this is the fun part, Greg.
Yes, sir. This is the fun part.
So Greg is set up back here with some flare examples. So piping best practices. If you make a proper flare, you don't have leaks, right?
Well, if you use a torque wrench too.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So Gree systems use mechanical thread flare fittings. Prepping the threads with refrigeration oil can reduce scoring and improve seal. You'll notice if you saw the slide here, it says PVE refrigeration oil. The reason that we say PVE is because that's what is used in the Gree systems. It's not POE. PVE oil is less hydroscopic and it's longer lasting oil. So, all right,
so we're gonna do a few flares here and talk about flares here. So I've got some pre-made up here just to kind of save time. We've got several different versions of the flaring blocks back here as well. This is a real old school one. This is a NIVAC one and the Black Max by CPS. I mean, I really don't care what you guys use. We're not here to promote tools. We don't even sell tools. So whatever you like the best, whatever makes your job the easiest, the only thing we're talking about is the quality of the flare. We got to make sure the flare is done properly, and then I highly recommend a flare gauge. You should be checking your flares to make sure they're made properly. I've got examples here of a perfectly good flare, and this flare block here, there's a little bitty ring in there's a stop, and you push that in there, it should stop. It should not go all the way through. If it goes all the way through, the flare was made too small. If it won't go in there at all, the flare is too big. So that's one thing to be mindful of. So I got one here, it's oversized. It won't even fit in the hole. if you can kind of see what I'm talking about there, it won't even fit in the hole, versus the one that is properly sized, fits right in there and stops at the stop. And then here's a couple more that were made properly. This one's too small, so when I go to through it, if I just push on a little bit, it pushes it all the way through. So we know that flare is too small, so it's not going to seal properly. And then I got a couple here that they weren't deburred, and it's really probably hard to see in the camera, but I put a little marker mark in there. So if you look in there compared to a good flare, if you look at that flare closely, you can see the imperfections in the surface of that flare, and that's what you don't want. If you have little imperfections in there, or a piece of brass hitting it funny, or sticking up there, when you put that to the mating surface, it's going to give you when you crank that down, it's going to mess up the mating surface of the flare, and there's your potential leak right there. So you need to make sure we're using a good, proper deburring tool. Again, I don't care whose brand you're using, but you want to make sure you put your flare nut on first. Don't forget that.
A couple of months ago,
I think everybody's done it
at least twice in a row.
Mm-hmm. Well, the good part is you didn't do it with a torch and then grab the pipe with your hand and realize that you really made a big mistake. So, but make sure you get your flare nut on there. Then take that deburring tool in there. Always point it down so that you make sure you're getting all of that edge out of there. And then what I've always done, I don't have one today because I didn't look for one, but I've always used a little pocket screwdriver, and I would just kind of dig it down in there and smack it around just to make sure I didn't have a piece of copper shaving there or something.
Yep.
And then
a clean pocket screwdriver.
And again,
not one you stuck in the dirt.
Yeah, a clean pocket screwdriver. And then again, I don't care whose flaring block you use, but most any flaring block, this is the NIVAC one, which is automatic. The Black Max has it as well. Right here it has a stop. So when you feed your thing in through, your pipe in through there, you hit that stop. That sets your depth. Same as this one here. It's got the little stop on there. So you just unclamp it, slide that over, make sure you're all the way flush to it. And then on the NIVAC here, I don't do this every day, guys, so most of you guys out there can probably make a better flare than me. I can almost guarantee you can make a better flare than me, but and backs back off. And then she's done. Kind of slick little tool there, but I've got a nice clean mating surface there. Flare nut goes down nicely over it. I can take my flare gauge, put it on there. I've got a nice perfect flare. It's hitting that stop in there. It's not too small, it's not too big. I've made myself a good clean flare. There's no funny burrs or anything on it. I'm ready to go.
Ready to roll.
So the time you spent making good flares and using a torque wrench is going to be money saved in the field. So anything else you want to say about making flares?
No. Let's talk about the torque wrench now. I really liked your examples on the flares there, and also on the slide here, we've got some examples of improper flares on those as well.
Yeah, you can see that one in that picture. It doesn't even really hardly even have a flare.
Yeah. So,
and I wasn't working here, but not too many years ago, I was involved with a VRF project, and we took a phone call, and the guy said that the copper pipe just blew out of the flare nut. It was only one way it blew out of the flare nut. the flare wasn't done right. It's not going to just blow out of the flare nut. And that's what you're seeing right there, is that flare, there's no shoulder to that flare at all. Some of the myths that have been out there is there special flares.
Yeah, and they're not.
They're not. They're a 45-degree flare. It's always been a 45-degree flare.
Yep.
So, but the newer flaring tools compared to the older one, not that that wouldn't work, they've come a long ways. They've got them simple. They're powered. Even this one does a really nice job. It's got a clutch. It's not going to over torque it. I'm sure that thing's got a built-in clutch to it as well. It doesn't over smash the flare. I mean, we've just come a long ways with making flares. So, and other types of deburring tools, if you make a good flare, I don't see any reason for buying special adapters so you don't have to make a flare, the push fittings. We're not going to tell you can't use them, but a small investment in a good flaring tool, you shouldn't need to.
Right.
And we know for a fact that if you do the flares properly and you use a torque wrench to torque a specification, and I've said this in training for years now, a little bit of oil goes a long way, and it doesn't even necessarily got to be refrigerant oil. You could take you need a non-detergent oil, but like a Zoom oiler. One little bitty drop of oil and just smear it on that surface. And then little drop on the threads. That's it. Yep. All you need. And then always hand spin your flare nut on. That way you know it's true. Take it as tight as you can with your fingers, and then absolutely put the torque wrench on it on top of it.
Yep.
So
you want to talk about the torque wrench now?
We might as well.
Yeah. Let's move over here, and so here we have Black Max torque wrench. This one is electronic, so that you can set your torque settings in there. I've pre-programmed this one. So number 1 is set to the 1/4 inch, and that's 10 to 13. And then your 3/8 is what is it, Greg?
25 to 30 foot-pounds.
25 to 30. And so you just pick which one. I've got them set at the upper end, but you can set them in the middle if you want. I just set them to the upper end because a lot of times just this adjustable jaw, it's really nice to be adjustable like that, but it does have a little bit of play in it. So I like to make sure that I get towards the top end of that torque setting.
Before we torque that, I want to kind of talk a little bit about, I did this yesterday. I pre-bent these with the Black Max tubing bender there. And this is what I was talking about earlier, even with the indoor units. I've been in this business for over 30 years, and I can tell you right now that I'm never gonna bend a 90 with my hands that clean.
Yep.
Even if it is 1/4 inch pipe, you're still not going to bend a 90-degree bend that clean and have a perfect 90 like that with your hands.
Yep.
And that's why I say these mini splits, they work great, but it's all about flow and refrigerant. Yep. And we want every single bend as much as you possibly can. If you want no issues with the equipment, you want to be able to put that in for your customer and them not have any problems, I can't stress enough how much how important it is to go that extra mile, have the right tool, bend the tubing with the proper tool to do it.
Yeah, and there's something to be said for clean straight lines when you're.
It looks neat, looks professional.
It looks really professional, and putting some care into what we're doing here.
The old saying that my boss told me years ago, the very first company I ever worked for, he says, your speed will come from knowing the process to do it properly, because it doesn't take any longer to do a job neatly as it does to hurry up and just do it and get it done.
And so taking the time,
he said, if you take your time and learn your process, and that's where I say a lot of you guys, if you're installing Gree products, you probably You've probably done way more flares and way more bends than I ever have, and you get your system down, and that's where, and you get your repetition down, and that's where you're going to get your speed from. It doesn't. It's not how fast you can run to the truck.
Yeah.
It's how prepared you are for the job, having the right tools there, knowing how you're going about it, and making your bends and everything clean
and you know,
proper.
Something I don't think we mentioned this, but so with a torque wrench, when I first started here, I came from residential service, and I did a lot of installs. I started, doing heating and air with my dad when I was 10 or 12 years old, and so I didn't have a torque wrench, nor did I see the purpose in it. So the first Gree unit that when I started that I got sent, I'm like, okay, I got to figure out how to do these flares, right? Well, I was using a crescent or an adjustable wrench, a big one. I was using an adjustable wrench that was basically this size, and when I tightened that 1/4 inch one down, and then I took my nitrogen and put my pressure on it to check for leaks, it blew the 1/4 inch out. So I made it again, and I tighten it down, and then I do it again. And so what I ended up doing is I've got like that size right there, a little pocket adjustable. I ended up getting one of those to get that one up and going, and I had to use the leak detector and all that and I had to tighten it some more to get it to stop. But I was breaking the flare off of it, and I probably wasn't
over-tightening it. Yep.
I was over-tightening that flare, and I was snapping the flare face off of the copper. So
I believe it.
The price of this is what? What do we say? One.
It's cheaper than one callback.
It's cheaper than one callback to just buy a torque wrench and put it on.
Let's go ahead and torque these specifications so we can demonstrate it. I'll let you do that.
So we're going to set this to number 1 there, and now when I put this on here, I want to make sure that I've got a good grip on it, so I'll kind of tighten it down well and wiggle it a little bit so that I know that it's got a good grip on there. And then as I go around, I'm going to take it, and I may need to open it a little bit, and I'm going to tighten it again. That way I've got a good grip. Otherwise, I'm not going to get a good torque reading. Then almost as important as the torque wrench is still having an adjustable so that I can put it on here as a backup. Now, until I go to open these, I'll leave this the cap on here. That way it's a good spot to put my backup, and then I can put some pressure on that, and then I can go ahead and torque this down. Hear that beep? And then I can do it a little bit more, and it's going to beep, and then it'll vibrate when I'm at it. There it is. And then I'll go ahead and move to my 3/8 setting. I'll use my backup wrench again. And sometimes I'll go ahead and, because
my fingers are weak and I didn't get it very tight.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and tighten it down just a little bit because I know I'm not going to go past. That way I've got it pretty close to where I want it to be. And then
we're not making it easy on you either. With
no,
the
with the vacuum pump in the way there. And torque it down.
And sometimes you got to put the wrench on backwards. It'll still torque.
There it is. And that's ready to leak test. Now we didn't. I
didn't put any oil on there, but a little drop of oil. Like I said, it's not a have to, but it's not a bad idea either.
Yeah.
And I've had questions about, well, how much does that change your torque setting from wet to dry? if you're just using that smear of oil like I'm talking about, it's minimal. It's going to change it. It's not going to hurt it. You're still not going to over torque it.
I've had a few test units sent to me that were uninstalled, and all of this will just be wet with oil, not from where they recovered anything, because this pipe here, once you pull it down, but it'll just have all of this gunk around this. You just needed a little drop.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be a bunch.
Yep, hardly any at all, to be honest with you.
On the slide, we're talking about, don't use any leak lock stuff. Great products, but they're not made for flares. It's made for. You
shouldn't need it
for pipe.
The manufacturer, they specify torque ratings for a reason.
Yep.
And like I said, we've come a long ways in the quality tools that can build good flares. You shouldn't need them.
And then.
And like I said, back to the previous slide, we're not telling you, I think it was after that, we're not telling you can't use press fit. You can use press fit if you want. You can use those other quick connect fittings, the push-on ones like that. Mm-hmm. But Daniel, I know, is taking the call. I've taken the call where they tell me, hey, this thing, it won't hold a vacuum, but it'll hold pressure. They can put 500 pounds of pressure on it. It'll hold for a week, and then they'll go to pull a vacuum on it, won't hold at all. I think it has something to do with the design of those fittings and the way it puts pressure out on the mo-rings in there to gives it its seal. When you put it on a vacuum and you pull that copper does have an expansion and contraction rate just like anything else, and I think it's just enough that void being inside that pipe is causing that fitting to leak. Now, I don't know that for sure. I can't say they're defective fittings. But it may have been that the installer didn't put the fitting in right. I don't know. But
it could have been a burr that cut the O-ring. Any little thing like that could affect it.
Just sharing what we've learned from you guys out in the field, calling in and talking to us, and this is what you've ran into. So, and that's where we still go back to.
And is it possible they're using a little bit too high CFM pump, a vacuum pump?
I don't know for sure, but I know the flares work.
Yeah.
As long as you make the flare proper, use a flare gauge, torque them to specification, they will work and they won't leak.
Yep.
So.
All right, we talked about the bender. So now we're at the leak check stage. I know we've already got the vacuum gauge on here just for example. We don't want this on here when we're in the leak test stage, okay? We don't want to damage our vacuum gauge. Now this particular one I have is rated so that it won't damage it, but I would not have this on there to do the leak test. So on the example we have here on our nitrogen tank, Greg brought this awesome regulator.
That's a pretty cool regulator. I do like it.
And that's mine is just the regular style, but this one has the purge and flow on here. So all you have to do is click this, right? You
just crank it in.
You just crank it in,
and it'll set
then it'll set it to either if you are raising
purge, or you can set it to flow and put it at really high pressure or get up to 500 pounds.
Yeah,
it's very versatile.
So the big thing here is these systems, high pressure cutout is around 600 psi. Don't be afraid to go ahead and put enough nitrogen pressure on this to actually find a leak if there is one. If you put 200 psi on it, you're likely to not find a leak that is going to leak at 400 psi. So we kind of go with the 400 psi range. It's a safe range, but also you're going to find any leaks.
You know, and today we're talking about installation. So you're going to have, even if you have piping to 4 heads, you don't have the volume of the condenser involved in there at all. Mm-hmm. You're not going to use a ton of nitrogen.
Right.
That one tank holds a lot of nitrogen.
Yep.
Just kind of off subject, in case you guys are ever wondering, it It takes one of these tanks full to fill 4 camper tires, just so you know. So that's quite a bit of nitrogen, you know, when you got to charge them up to 65 psi each. And you figure I did 4 camper tires with 1 tank.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's quite a bit of nitrogen. So, and I'm talking, you know, a 27-foot camper, so those pretty good sized tires. But anyway, you know, the nitrogen that the money you spend on nitrogen refills are cheap. Mm-hmm. It's worth its weight in gold.
It's well worth it.
It beats the charge being let out of that machine. Then you find a leak. Now the 410A is not so cheap anymore. I'd much rather find that leak with nitrogen than the refrigerant.
And then the other key is once you pressurize it, you're not always going to hear anything. But if you use some good leak detector solution and soap your fittings good, then if anything's there, you're going to find it.
Yep. And then the other test that you're going to do is just by holding vacuum. So once we get past this stage,
correct.
Now we're going to go into evacuation.
So let's move forward a little bit, and just before we move forward on that, I'm not sure if
we need to make mention about that.
Yeah. So your flare nuts that come from the factory are on the outdoor unit, and they have these little copper bonnets that as just a cover to keep trash out of in there. These I have actually had pictures of these being left on and forced up into the line set. So make sure when you're using that factory flare nut and putting it on the pipe that you get this bonnet out of the way. And these, I save these too, because if I ever need to cap something off, then I'll grab one of these and put on there just so it's a good clean cap.
Yep.
So I have a little bag of those that I save. Now, evacuation. The minimum vacuum that we want to pull it down to is not 30.
About 30 inches.
Not 30 inches of mercury on your gauge. We want to use an actual micron gauge, and we want to pull it down below 500. We always want to make sure we've got a good vacuum pump with clean oil. So each evacuation, how often should you change your oil?
Well, it depends on what you're doing. I mean, if your vacuum pump is strictly being used for new installation, your oil's
it'll last a while.
You're probably going to be a while before you have to change your oil. Yeah. But if you're doing, and we'll get into that a little more thoroughly when we talk about actually, now we're servicing the unit, we've had a leak in it, now we got to evacuate the entire system, including the condenser. That's a whole another conversation about how we go about doing that evacuation. But you can do a bunch of installs and not have to change the oil when you're just pulling down refrigerant lines on a coil.
Now, this is just the vacuum gauge that I've got, or micron gauge. I've got an adapter because the Schrader core remover that we have on here. Now, the Schrader core remover is not necessary. We don't have to have that. The only reason that I use it in this instance is so that I have a T-port for my micron gauge. I want my micron gauge to be as close to the unit as I can get it. I don't want it to be near my vacuum pump if possible. So I want that when I shut this off, and that's the other thing, that even if you're not using a Schrader core remover, you need some type of valve, whether it be a low loss valve here, so you can shut this off when you turn your vacuum pump to test your rise. We want to have that valve there so we can lock that off, but still read the microns in our line set.
So just to kind of recap a little bit, so if you're getting ready, you're set up, you're pulling your vacuum, you're pulling on your micron gauge, this is open, the valve core's out. As you can see laying there on the table, the valve core's already been out. So now we're pulling a vacuum plumb through this, we're pulling a vacuum on this, we're pulling a vacuum on our lines. It's going up through the indoor coil, coming back on the smaller line. We're evacuating both sides. So now we've reached our 500 microns. We know we're down. So now the first thing we're going to do, before we even shut the pump off,
Yep.
is we're going to take that valve. Now obviously this valve would have been open doing that. We're pulling down everything. We're down to 500 microns. The very first thing we're going to do is switch this off. Now the vacuum gauge is only reading the unit.
Correct.
Then if you want, you can turn your pump off and just let it sit. And we want to make sure we don't rise above.
It doesn't rise above 1,000 in 30 minutes.
In 30 minutes.
Is what we're looking for. And the key that I look for is it's always going to rise. So it's going to rise a little bit, but then it's going to stop and it's going to slow down, and then it's going to tick back down. And it may just be that's just one or two.
Yeah, I don't think it's not. It may not be much. And
then
again,
I know I've got a good vacuum.
Again, that's going to be a big difference as to whether we're pulling down just a coil and a line set on a new installation. You're going to hold vacuum on that better than if we're servicing this unit and we're having to pull down compressor, accumulator, and everything else. That's a whole other story, which we will be talking more thoroughly about when we talk about evacuation process. So one thing I want to point out here too, and maybe Daniel, I'm jumping ahead, but you just did this process on a single zone.
Correct.
You're going to repeat the process on a multi-zone. So you're going to do one set, then you're going to do the next set,
correct,
and you're going to do the next set, and you're going to do the next set. Each set of ports, A, B, C, D, you have to evacuate them separately.
Now I will say this, if you've got your gauges, you've got a manifold where you can hook up to, you can do that. You can pull two circuits at once.
You can.
But they do have to be pulled at least at the same time.
Correct.
You can't pull it on let's say A port, for instance. You can't pull it on A and test it and you're good and you open it and then open B and C and D. You've got to make sure you're pulling a vacuum on each circuit. Now, because each circuit is separate from the refrigerant until you open these valves. Now, once you've done that and you open A and B and C and D, then the refrigerant is shared throughout the entire system.
So one caveat to that, and this is my opinion, it takes longer if you've got a multi-zone unit to pull down each circuit separately. But what you got to keep in mind, though, is if you pull down one of those circuits and one's not holding, you've just saved yourself time.
Correct.
Because now a circuit must have a leak.
Right.
So while I'm dealing with trying to figure out where I'm leaking on A circuit, I got my vacuum pump running on my B circuit. I'm dealing with my A circuit.
Find the leak
I
on
get
A.
that corrected.
Yeah.
Now I'd go back and pull a vacuum on that one. That way, individually, you've isolated it to one circuit at a time as whether or not you got leaks.
In case there is a leak, yeah.
So
and that makes perfect sense.
To each to their own.
Yep.
I personally would do each one separately, but you can pull from multiple ports if you want. Again, you're only pulling lines and coil down. We don't have to do this whole triple evacuation and stuff like that, which we will talk about in service. You strictly just need to pull a vacuum. You do your pressure test with the nitrogen. You make sure you don't have any leaks. You let the nitrogen back out, and we do our evacuation on the lines and coil. So,
excellent. We already talked about adding additional charge and piping rules and things like that. If you are if you're needing to add charge for your additional line length, we've got a scale over here that Greg was kind enough to bring as an example, and we've got our refrigerant tank. We want to make sure that we're taking that refrigerant tank and we're turning it upside down, right? Because we want to push liquid in. Now, at this point, after you're verified that your vacuum is correct, you can go ahead and weigh those few ounces back in or into the system. The vacuum is going to pull it in.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't have a problem trying to force the refrigerant into the system. Now, if you are in a colder climate, you may have to get the system started up in heat, cool mode to try to pull any additional in. Also, they do make blankets for for anyone out there in the cold weather installation areas. They do make heat blankets for refrigerant drums. So if you need to, you can warm them up and then go ahead. So even if you have to warm it up, put it in with the vacuum.
It's interesting that you bring up cold weather like that. So what else should we be doing when it's that cold outside?
You've got a really good point. So before we complete this process, and I would recommend it on any Gree system that we sell, is that you power this thing up for a minimum amount of time prior to starting it, so that compressor crankcase heater has time to warm up the compressor, and then once we open our valves, we can get that liquid out of that compressor so we don't damage the compressor when it starts up.
You don't have to have, even though you powered it up, doesn't mean you have to turn it on.
Right.
Right? You can have all your remotes in the off mode. All we want is power applied to this condenser while we're doing this whole evacuation process. And, if you're if you're around 50 degrees or higher, you probably only got to have power to it maybe in a couple hours.
Yeah.
Probably not even that long, maybe an hour. But you start getting down below freezing, let's say from 15 to 30-ish, probably going to want that warmed up for several hours. And there's time for you to do that. You can have power applied to this while you're doing other things and getting the job done. And then if it's really cold outside, I'd say below 15 degrees, you're probably going to want to warm that thing up for about 4 hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then if you ever have a service issue with one and it's not working or something, don't tell the customer to turn the breaker off.
No.
Let it be out on the air code.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that when you get there, it's still powered. That crankcase heater's still powered up. It's still warm. So if it's just a thermistor issue or a pressure switch issue or whatever you can easily fix, that unit is not going to be sitting there, because the refrigerant's going to migrate to the coldest place, and that coldest place is going to be in that compressor. Outside. So now once you fix that thing and you fire it back up, we're not firing up a compressor sitting there full of a bunch of liquid.
Right.
And that's I've had comments that I've never had to do that with a heat pump before, and you should have always been doing that with a heat pump. Any manufacturer of a heat pump.
Greg, that's a good point, because if you've never had to do that with a heat pump before, a lot of the reason is because heat pumps didn't work anywhere where it was 0 degree.
Well, they worked. They just didn't work because they don't put out the heat that these machines do.
They don't put out the heat, so most.
But if you're starting up a heat pump in 10 degree weather,
yeah, and
it's been powered off, and that liquid, I guarantee you, there's liquid sitting on the compressor.
Oh yeah,
guarantee it.
Yep.
And now, whether or not damage is enough to affect the operation of it, it's better to err on the side of caution than having to deal with now the machine won't keep up. It runs, it just won't heat because the compressor is inefficient now, or whatever the case may be. So it's back to what we preach all day long is best practices.
Yep, best practices and industry standards.
We all know the rules of refrigeration. Refrigeration migrates to the coldest point, and the coldest point is going to be outside, which is going to be in that compressor. You're going to have liquid refrigerant when there's that cold. Yep. So a pre-warm up to it, get that crankcase heater going is not a bad thing.